Hey there, folks. Vegas Trader 66 coming at you with this week's market wrap video. Hope you had a fantastic week trading. If you caught last week's market wrap video or the live Ticker TV stocks to watch session, you know that we were focused on the agricultural sector for this week, and that really played out extremely well. So we've been focused on we were focused on ag, and we were also focused on biotechs, which we have been watching for the last several weeks, and we'll go over that in a minute. But let's talk about what happened today in the overall markets and the Nasdaq in particular. So we had some big cap tech names, Microsoft, Google, IBM, report, and they really did not report all that good of earnings, and their guidance wasn't that good either. So we did see some weakness in the Nasdaq today. Wasn't as significant as I thought it would be, and actually the overall markets held up fairly well, which was kind of a shocker, right? So I know that everybody and their brother continues to hate this rally because they've missed it, right? That's the big problem. We've talked about the fact that there's a pretty significant short interest within the S&P 500, and we also talked about the fact that that could be the very fuel that we need to take out all-time highs, right? And for right now, it appears as though we remain on track to potentially do that. So let's talk. So the Nasdaq, I would be cautious in the tech space as well as the semiconductor space. Let's go there real quick. They both look a little week, okay? And we could potentially see some type of a breakdown in tech and SMH. Although I have to say, SMH is actually holding up fairly well. If it cracks below, this support line, then things could get a little sketchy, right? We could get a pullback maybe to 52.50 or something like that. If this doesn't hold as an area of support, then maybe we come down and test $50. But I would be careful, be cautious within uh, the tech space and the semiconductor space. Now, let's go back up here for a second. Let's talk about this. So we did have an IPO today, which is a cybersecurity IPO, and it did not fare that well. It actually priced below at the low end of the range, and they wound up not being able to sell as many shares. So it did not really price all that well. But I have to say, the cybersecurity space still looks like it's trying to consolidate here potentially before it takes out this longer term trend line. And cyber and hack both look the same, right? I mean, consolidating, potentially getting ready, build up some energy to make some type of a move, but it might need more time and probably need some earnings out of the sector to get the space moving. Let's talk about the IBB. So we were talking about how we've been talking about the last several weeks how maybe the IBB was going to do what it did back here, was bounce around between these two areas of resistance and support before it finally broke down, and now we had crossed back up into this area of resistance and support, and looking to bounce around here and potentially take out 285 is really what we were looking at, taking out 285 and felt as though maybe we could get a move up to 300, right? And then come up and test this trend line. And it looks as though we could potentially get that next week. Now, next week is a big week for biotech earnings. We've got Celgene, we've got Gilead, we've got Amgen reporting next week. So that could be the catalyst that actually breaks us out of this range. Okay, and it could also be the thing that breaks us right back down. So that'll be something that we certainly want to watch next week. Now, gold miners. I mean, they have been on a tear. Okay, absolute tear. JNUG, Nugget. I mean, all of these things were absolutely parabolic. And I would suggest that they've gotten a little overdone. And now what we really need to pay close attention to, and I've been kind of stressing this over the last several weeks, is that we've got to pay close attention to the strength of the dollar. If the dollar continues to drop, then you're going to see gold and the gold miners probably continue to rip. If the dollar reverses and starts to strengthen, then you could see some weakness in gold and the precious metals and maybe even the steel stocks. You could see some pressure in those. Now, the dollar over the last few days had a nice little pop. Okay, and what's interesting about this is we also have the Fed coming up next week. So make sure you mark that on your calendar, right? With the Fed coming up, if they sound extremely hawkish, or we even get a surprise rate hike, or they indicate that they're going to raise the rate in June, then you could see the dollar strengthen even more, and um, that could lead to some more weakness in the precious metal and miners. So just keep that in mind. Now, let's talk about oil real quick. Oil is looking really, really strong, and the oil exploration uh, ETF is looking really strong. So let's take a look at the XLE, which is this is the energy ETF. Looks really strong. Now listen, I know we've had a big move up, okay? And I know that everyone is anticipating that we're going to get this another move headed back down. But you know, here's what you got to really think about and look at. Oil and energy names have been in a downward dominant trend for a very long time. I mean, look at where we've come from and where we are now. I mean, we've just broken over this trend line. Okay, this is just the beginning of a trend reversal. So it could have a significant amount of room to the upside. Okay, and it's not to say that we're going to go straight up. We may come back down and test this trend line, right? We might get a pull, come back down. Actually, that would be a very healthy thing if that happened. But you know, to think that this move is just going to be overdone and all of a sudden we're going to go back down to the bottom again, I don't see that really happening. Okay, I think we've broken a major trend, and this could last for longer than many anticipate. Financials, even though financials weren't that great, they're acting pretty strong, which is interesting, right? Back above the 200-day moving average. So the question is, you know, is the Fed going to indicate that they're raising the rates, which would be good for the banks? And how will the markets react to that? Will we get an immediate sell-off, or would the market actually like the fact that we're getting back to a normalized interest rate policy? I don't know. I mean, who knows? We'll have to wait and see what happens. Home builders, you know, consolidating nicely right on top of the 200-day moving average, right? Uh, we're building up some energy here. Which way we break, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see how it plays out next week, but it does look relatively constructive. Utilities. This is also interesting. Had a fairly significant pull, right? And the way we kind of got to think about it is, you know, high yield, yielding names. So if the interest rate does start to climb, would that actually put a hurting a little bit on the utilities? Let's take a look at so another space that we actually liked last week and continue to like this week is aerospace. right? Aerospace and defense, broke over this trend line here, consolidating at a pretty key level of price support and resistance, right? And it seems to be acting as that, as though it is holding up as support. And we may see uh, some consolidation, build up some energy before we continue to move higher. Let's talk about volatility. There isn't any, right? There's like no volatility. So you're not getting a lot of play out of TVIX or UVXY. The VIX continues to languish down here. There is a lot of complacency in the market. But what's funny is there may be a lot of complacency, but there is also a tremendous amount of short interest out there, right? Everybody's anticipating that we're going to roll over. Again, that could be the fuel that continues to send us higher. Let's see here what else we have. So we talked about financials, industrials. So we got reports out of GE, we got reports out of Honeywell, and we got reports out of who else was it? There was some other big industrial player. Decent reports, right? And guidance was fairly decent. So maybe we look for the industrials to continue to move higher. Now, look, these are big, big, safe, dividend paying type names. It takes a lot to move them, but it could be a sector that all of a sudden becomes in fuego. Instead of the high momentum names, which have been, the Netflixes, the Teslas, the Facebooks, the Apples, the Googles, maybe those cool off a bit and we get some rotation into some more of these big type industrial plays. Let's talk about real quick here the IWM, which has been incredibly strong. So, we've got a lot of breadth in this market as we continue to move higher. Mid caps actually look pretty good. We're consolidating after a really nice move up, consolidating, looking as though we want to build some energy to potentially move higher. Let's take a look at the IWM. IWM consolidating, closed right at the high of the day, right? At an area of potential resistance, consolidating, looking as though it would like to move potentially higher. So we'll see if we can take out 115 next week. But there is still a lot of stuff out there that looks pretty good. Labu, right? So if the IBB does break out to the upside, look for Labu to make a move higher. That could be a nice trading vehicle if you get a sharp move higher in the IBB. S&P 500, let's go there real quick. So, we're within a whisper of all-time highs, right? We did have a little bit of a pullback today. Nothing, or a little bit of a pullback over the last couple of days. Nothing significant. Nothing is, you would have expected that we would have had a more intense pullback after those earnings last night. Just didn't happen. So, look, we could come back and test this 2040 if we, and this is your Fibonacci levels right here, right? So 2040, look for that to be an area of potential support. And then after that, 2000. And then below that, 1960. So, we've got some areas of potential support here. If we can, we're trading within a range. We can come down here pretty quickly to this 2040. But if we can take out all-time highs, I think you could potentially see some squeezing going on. So, what else do we have to go over here real quickly? All right, so listen, I'm not going to take up a whole lot more time here. Well, you know what? Let's just do this. Let's take a look at the T2108 and the T2107 real quick. look, we're still up here in the nosebleed section, but it's holding up, right? I mean, it came down and tested the 70 and bounced off of it. Looks like maybe we're going to do a little retest here. Uh, T2107, the stock's above their 200-day moving average. I mean, it's starting to get up into the nosebleed section, right? It finds some resistance up in this area. 70 would be extremely high for the T2107. So don't get me wrong. I do see the fact that we are primed to have a pretty decent sized correction, but the market continues to climb the wall of worry. And if the IBB can break out next week off of those earnings, that could be a really good thing for the markets. If the oils continue to move higher, if the energy space continues to show strength, that's gonna be tough on a lot of the shorts. You see, we talked about gold, we talked about tech, we talked about SMH. If the market does by chance roll over, I mean, if oil rolls over, so that the ones that I'm watching, the ETFs that I pay close attention to are SPXS. If the S&P 500 rolls over, DRIP, right? If energy exploration and starts to roll over, I will look to play DRIP, which just continues to make new lows. DWTI is another one that you can watch, right? At a pretty interesting area of potential support. JDST, full disclosure, I actually am already in JDST. If gold continues to roll over, JDST could be in play. Dust could be in play. Let's take a look at dust. I mean, these things have gotten absolutely demolished as the miners have been on fire. But there's some pretty good looking setups out there. I still like the agricultural space, even though it did have a couple of days of pullback here. I want to see how it reacts next week. You got to pay close attention to the dollar next week, and of course we got to pay close attention to earnings as they come in. But really, really good week for trading. Hopefully you were positioned well. And let's see what next week brings us with these earnings. And also, don't forget about the Fed. That's probably going to be a market moving event one way or another. If they come in really hawkish, like I said, I think you could see the dollar start to rise. You could see some pressure in some of the sectors that have been ripping. We'll see. Okay. All right, listen, I will be doing stocks to watch for next week, Sunday morning, 8 a.m., Las Vegas time on Ticker TV. Join me there. Love to see you there. If you can't make it, but you've got a list of stocks that you would like me to go over in the stocks to watch, go ahead and send them to me, email me, tweet me, and I will try to make sure I get them on the list. Okay? Have a fantastic Friday evening, a wonderful Saturday, and I will see you all Sunday morning. Well, I won't see y'all. I'll see some of you Sunday morning, and the rest of you I'll see next week. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.